Okay, after Oparin put up his hypothesis about the appearance or the formation of organic molecules by lightning and UV, by the reaction of lightning and UV on simple gaseous molecules. Most scientists didn't pay attention to it, but a scientist, Stanley Miller, actually tested that hypothesis in 1953. He created a kind of artificial environment where he replaced the air that was present in his environment with water vapor, with methane, hydrogen, and ammonia, the same gases that Oparin had mentioned to have surely been existent at the time when the Earth was formed. So he created that artificial environment to try and reproduce what Oparin was hypothesizing about. Okay, so we had all the gases there. He would then So from the knowledge that at that time, at the beginning of that time, the Earth was experiencing violent storms, Miller, in his artificial environment, recreated it, tried to reproduce by heating water and passing the gases, those methane and all the rest, and ammonia, all the rest, passing all these gases past a high voltage electric spark. That spark was kind of to represent the lightning that Oparin had talked about before. So after a week, he observed the content of the flask and he realized that it had turned red. So when he studied the content of that flask, Miller found amino acids and other organic compounds. We know amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. Remember that there were no amino acids in that environment before. It just occurred as a result of the mixture of these gases passed through an electric spark to represent the lightning. So most probably these basic compounds in the gases reacted on their own thanks to the lightning to form organic molecules such as amino acids, which if combined will be forming proteins, and we know proteins are part of every living organism. That's in a way to show how life must have started spontaneously. That's why we talk sometimes of spontaneous generation. Okay, that life just started on its own spontaneously. That's what Miller was trying to reproduce or to recreate inside his laboratory in a controlled environment. Okay. However, many scientists did not support Miller's findings. They believed that primitive Earth did contain oxygen, and that the level of oxygen were high enough to prevent the formation of organic compounds. So as opposed to Oparin and other scientists, these other scientists said no, primitive Earth actually had oxygen. So oxygen would have prevented the formation of organic compounds. Okay, so it's freezing too much today. Now, this is what happens during the Pre-Cambrian times. If you look at this chart here, we're going from mostly the recent times, from here, 0.5 billions of years ago, far back into time to about 4.5 billions of years ago during the formation of Earth. So here, Earth formed 3.5 billion years ago. The earliest life forms appeared, the prokaryotes. I think I mentioned them in another slides. And these prokaryotes were able to photosynthesize, hence they produce oxygen, which brought about the increase, or oxygen which was increasing in the atmosphere produced by these photosynthetic bacteria, brought about the creation of the first eukaryotes. advanced organisms of the kingdom Protista. For example, organisms like the Plasmodium that cause malaria, organisms like Euglena. Okay, those are protists. These are eukaryotes. It means that they have for the first time true nucleus. And they were mainly just unicellular, made up of one cell. Okay, they had a true nucleus with a nuclear membrane around the nucleus. And 0.5 billion years ago, we started having the earliest animals developing just before the Cambrian period. Okay, so this is just what the life history before the Cambrian period from the start of the Earth. Okay, exercise you could do. The Cambrian explosion. Otherwise, we could call it the animal explosion. Okay. It lasted for just about 38 million years, and that's how it's when it started, how it ended. The most peculiar thing about the Cambrian period is that it is that time when we saw for the first time a huge number of different animal species all of a sudden appearing on Earth in masses like never before. So animals started suddenly to appear within a very short period of time. Now, why was there no Cambrian explosion before that? Remember, the Earth was still very primitive with no oxygen or extremely low levels of oxygen. And all animals as we know them today are aerobes. They are not anaerobes. So they require oxygen for respiration. They are not like the anaerobic bacteria that can do without oxygen. So it means that we could not easily have many animals on Earth. But with the help of photosynthetic bacteria, as they started photosynthesizing and increasing the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere bit by bit, the amount of oxygen surely increased to sustainable levels where it could sustain more life than before. And so, for the first time, organisms that were comfortable with oxygen or that could only be alive thanks to oxygen started appearing. This included animals, where they appeared in huge numbers, such that we could visualize it as an explosion that we refer to as the Cambrian explosion. Otherwise, we call it the animal explosion, where animals populated the Earth within a very short period of time, all of a sudden. Okay, so how do we know that there was such an animal explosion? We know this because at a certain period in time, when we look at fossil records, we find all of a sudden at a certain period of time so many fossils of different animals that when we do the dating of these fossils, we realize that they appear at more or less the same times. Okay, so these fossils included, I'm taking it from the earliest times to the oldest times. Okay, I'll start with the oldest times, which fossils included fossils of sponges of the phylum Porifera. The sponges, they look like the artificial form of sponges that we use in for domestic work. Okay, they appeared about 540 million years ago. It included the mollusks, organisms that don't have bones, that appeared about 536 million years ago. The chordates, organisms with a primitive spinal cord, okay, or organisms with a backbone, the chordates, which appeared about 524 million years ago. And the colenterate, organisms with a coelom, the colenterate, with a body cavity, appeared about 520 million years ago. The annelids, which are the round worms, that appeared, the roundworms like the earthworms, for example, which appeared about 520 million years ago. Okay, the echinoderms, for example, like the sea stars, these are marine organisms, which appeared about 580 million years ago. Then the arthropods, for example, the crabs, the lobsters, insects, organisms that have an exoskeleton, skeletons outside their body, appeared about 530 million years ago. So all of these are of the same kingdom, the kingdom Animalia, where we include all animals. So that was the animal explosion from the kingdom Animalia. Okay, like I mentioned before, the epoch in which we now live is called the Holocene epoch. So we will now look at the history of life from the end of the Cambrian time until the modern Holocene epoch. And based on fossil records, again, this is the order in which scientists think organisms first appeared. Okay, this time from oldest times to present times, the fishes first appeared because somehow we believe that humans actually evolved from fishes, from fish forms. Okay, fishes first appeared about 438 million years ago. Reptiles, that was the second stage, and another stage, not necessarily a second stage, another stage into human evolution. Reptiles appeared about 385 million years ago. The amphibians, like the frogs or toads, appeared about 380 million years ago. The birds appeared about 180 million years ago. The mammals, because they have mammary glands, they breastfeed their young ones, appeared about 150 million years ago, and humans finally appeared about also 150 million to 200 million, or to 150,000, sorry, to 200,000 years ago. So humans have not been on planet Earth for even up to 1,000,000 years ago, but it's striking to see how much damage we've already caused to the planet. Okay, just for about 150,000 or 200,000 years that we've been here, we've done quite much. Now, the first bipedal animals of the human family appeared about 2 million years ago. Okay. The human family is referred to as the Hominidae, which included other human forms like the Bidecine. For example, you see that in grade 12. And we say bipedal. Bipedal means organisms or the ability to walk on two legs or two hind limbs rather than four, which is quadrupedalism. So humans stand upright and walk on two legs, that is bipedalism. So the bipedal animals of the human family, not necessarily humans, the humans are the Homo sapiens. The ancestral forms of humans appeared about 2 million years ago. Okay. So according to fossil records, there were many species of these bipedal organisms, like the apes. They were ape-like ancestors. They show gradual increase in height. As they were evolving, their height was increasing, their brain size also was increasing, and they were having more or less a flatter face like humans today. Our face is not long. It doesn't have that forward projection of the lower portion of the face, like if you can think of a dog. A dog's face is almost projected forward at the lower portion. But with humans, our face is more or less relatively flat, not like a dog. A chimpanzee's face is also a bit projected like a dog's own. So we humans have a flatter face. Okay. So it is believed that the earliest forms of those humans lived in Africa. That's why we also say, so I was saying it's believed that the earliest forms of humans lived in Africa. That's why we also say that humans took their origins from Africa and moved outside Africa to populate other parts of the world.